I said that the CIA was torturing its prisoners. I said that torture was official U.S. government policy. It was not the result of any rogue officer. And I said that the policy had been personally approved by the president himself. And then, as you can imagine, within 24 hours, the CIA files what's called a crimes report against me with the FBI, saying that I had revealed classified information. The FBI then investigates me from December of 2007 to December of 2008. And then they send my attorney a letter called a declination letter, declining to prosecute. They said that they had completed their investigation, that the information was already out there because of Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, and the Red Cross. But most importantly, torture is a crime, and it is illegal to classify a crime for the purpose of keeping it from the American people. 3-4 weeks later, Barack Obama becomes president, and he names John Brennan, at first CIA director, but the liberals went crazy because Brennan was one of the fathers of the torture program. Brennan immediately sends a memo to Eric Holder, the new attorney general, and says, talking about me, charge him with espionage. And Holder writes back and says, my people don't think he committed espionage. And then Brennan writes back and says, charge him anyway and make him defend himself. So they charged me with 5 felonies, 3 counts of espionage. They waited until I went bankrupt, and then they dropped the espionage charge. Well, as soon as Barack Obama became president, John Brennan decided he was going to have my head. And so he asked Holder to have the FBI grab me. From 2009 to the end of 2011, I was the senior investigator on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, working for John Kerry. Write it up as a memo, and I'm going to courier it over to the FBI. So I sat there and I wrote the whole thing, blow by blow. The next day he calls me, and he says, 2 FBI agents are going to come up and talk to you. And I said, okay. So they come up, I recount the whole lunch, and they said, all right, here's what we want you to do. We want you to call him back, invite him to lunch, and then try to get him to tell you exactly what information he wants and how much he's willing to pay for it. And I said, because I'm a patriot, I said, you want me to wear a wire? And they said, no. One day in January of 2012, so I've been out of the Senate for about 9 months, the FBI calls. I was like, I wonder what that's all about. So I answer, and they said, hey, you remember that thing you helped us out with a year ago? And I said, yeah. And they said, we've got a similar situation and we need your help. And again, because I'm a patriot, I said, anything for the FBI. I kick myself now for saying it. What do you want me to do? They said, come down to the Washington field office Thursday morning at 10. I said, done. I go down there the next Thursday, and they're waiting for me at the entrance, which I thought was odd. And we go up to a conference room, and they said, we're both cleared, SI, TK, Gamma, and then there were 2 compartments above top secret that I was cleared for that they said they were cleared for. So they said, well, before we start, just wanted to ask you, just read your book. I had fun. I said, it was kind of hard. It took me 9 months to write the book, 22 months to get it cleared. Oh yeah, you got it cleared. Yeah. 22 months it took me to get it cleared. I'm thinking, what an odd question. Then they start asking me about something called the Sam Adams Project. And I said, I'm sorry, and we're raiding your house right now as we speak. And I said, thank God. I said, I want to speak to my attorney right now. That was the only reason that they didn't arrest me. And in fact, since then, I'm fast forwarding a lot, 3 FBI agents have reached out to me. Well, 2 to my attorneys. 1 reached out to me directly to apologize, saying that this came from the top. They thought it was a BS case. They were sorry they were involved, but there was nothing they could do. I was facing 45 years in prison. And then when the Justice Department made a request for a proffer meeting, the proffer meeting is they'll give you a little idea of what they have against you, and then they make an offer. I didn't do anything wrong. And this woman, she became Deputy Attorney General for the criminal division under Biden. She said take this deal, Mr. My lead attorney was this legendary guy named Plato Kacharis. And Plato said, you know, I've been a criminal defense attorney in this city for 52 years. And this is the first time I've ever seen them come down in time. He said, usually they offer you 10, you say no, the next offer's 15, then the next offer's 20. I said, why are they coming down in time? He said, because they have a shit case and they know it's shit. And that's why we're going to go to trial and we're going to win this thing. I said, great. Well, they stayed at 5. And then they came back and they said 3.5. And I said, I'm going to trial. He came up to Washington. We got him a security clearance, and which was another thing. We asked for a security clearance, and then the Justice Department called and said, the White House said Kiriaku's attorneys have enough security clearances. And I said, who at the White House said we have enough security clearances? Well, they had to tell us that it was John Brennan. So in the end, they said, best and final offer, 30 months, you do 23. Well, I was only the second American who had ever been charged with this crime of violating the Intelligence Identities Protection Act of 1982. She was a CIA secretary in Ghana in the 80s, and she was having an affair with a member of Ghana's intelligence service. And in the course of pillow talk, she revealed the names of all of the CIA officers in the station and the names of the sources they were running. And so the Ghanaians executed these guys. So my wife and I stayed up all night, literally all night. And because Sharon Scranage had taken a plea, there was literally no case law. So what we found several things. We found several articles from the Harvard Law Review saying this law is unconstitutional. It violates the First Amendment, and it is prior restraint. And I said, well, can't we just appeal the charge and maybe, you know, all the way up to the Supreme Court? And they said, yeah, we can do that post-conviction. And then you're going to be 45 years waiting and hoping that the Supreme Court does the right thing. So I decided by 6 a.m., I'm going to turn it down. Believed in my heart I hadn't done anything right. It was a vendetta by John Brennan. And Obama, by all accounts, I had friends, of course, who were still working at the agency and working at the CIA or at the White House, and they said that Obama had this Nixonian obsession with national security leaks. He didn't have any experience doing anything, so he did what John Brennan told him to do. They do nothing but embarrass us. So I decided I'm going to turn it down, and then one of them writes back and says, "Put on a pot of coffee." Imagine this, like 80-year-old, 6'2", 280-pound, mean old man. He comes in, and I said, "Good morning, Plato." And he said, "You stupid son of a bitch. You're the one who told me we're going to go to trial and win this thing." And he says, "I only told you that to keep your spirits up." Oh, God. And then the second one, his partner, Bob Trout, a sweet gentleman, a Southern gentleman. He says, "If you were my own brother, I would beg you to take this deal." And I'm like, now what do I do? And then the third, who is the guy, Mark McDougall, one of the best attorneys I've ever encountered in my life. Take the deal. And I looked at my wife, and she's just like, what are we going to do? So I took the deal. And I got 2.5 years in prison, and they made me do every single day of it. Kiriaku be sent to a minimum security work camp. She says, "Any objection?" From the Justice Department, they said, "No objection." She goes, "Okay, minimum security work camp. No bars on the windows. I'm supposed to be at the minimum security camp across the street." And the guy laughs at me, and he goes, "Not according to my paperwork, you're not." And I was like, oh my God, take it easy. We later learned Brennan was so angry at the shortness of my sentence that he told them, make it as difficult as possible. So I told myself, take it easy. I was in FCI, the Federal Correctional Institution at Loretto, Pennsylvania, which is a low security prison, but it's called a low medium, and then there's a high medium. So this was low medium. It took me 5 days to get access to a phone. And I called Mark McDougall, the attorney that I liked so much. And I said, Mark, they put me in the actual prison with the pedophiles and the mafia dons and the drug kingpins. I said, what do I do? He says, oh my God,